Welcome, everyone. Welcome. So, based on which time zone you're in, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And I'm Bapusaheb Patil, and this is my talk, Design Thinking for Developers, Think Out of the Box. And just a little bit of background about me before I begin this talk. As I said, I'm Bapusaheb Patil. You can call me Bapu. I'm the lead creative strategist at Caster.io, where we teach, where we teach software development, and we have courses from industry pros. So I wanted to talk a little bit about design thinking today, but I wanted to preface this talk by saying that it's not just for designers. As much as the title says that, as much as the title has the word design in it, design thinking, it's not just for designers. And um, this has been the most common misconception about design thinking. Design thinking is a process, and it's a process that initially originated from UX designers, but not necessarily just for UX designers. So who is it for? Who is design thinking for? So it's for everyone. What I mean by that is it's literally for everyone. Design thinking is used in literature, it's used in art, it's used in music, it's used in technology, it's used in business. Um, and if you don't believe me, you can just do a simple search on design thinking in various fields on YouTube, and you'll see that design thinking is used in HR, it's used in business, it's used in marketing. So I'm not kidding when I say design thinking is for everyone. So there is one downside to it. Uh, it might not be for everyone. I asked my dad to use design thinking to figure out how to use Chromecast in my house. That didn't really work out well for me. So maybe not for everyone. I'm just kidding. But on a serious note, we have had a few recent adopters of design thinking. Some of them being Google, Apple, Samsung, and GE. And the when I say recent, it's relatively recent. They've adopted design thinking like a few years ago. So these are the businesses that use design thinking every day. Um, and a few of the top educators also use design thinking. IDF, Interaction Design Foundation, D School, Harvard, and MIT also use design thinking. They teach design thinking. Um, and now all of this is brings us to the main meat of this talk, which is what is design thinking. Um, so getting to the what of design thinking, it's an iterative process in which we try to understand humans, we challenge our assumptions, and we redefine problems. Now, why do we do this? Why do we have design thinking? We the reason that we use design thinking to understand humans, challenge assumptions, and redefine problems is because we can identify alternate strategies and solutions that might not be instantly apparent because of our initial level of understanding. So to translate this in different words, um, humans naturally develop patterns of thinking modeled on repetitive activities and commonly accessed knowledge. So what that means is, if you do the same things over and over again, and if you access the same kind of knowledge over and over again, your mind develops certain patterns where it tends to think around the same around the same lines over and over again. So you're not getting out of the box to think. So um, it's not so that's not necessarily a disadvantage, but they assist you in applying the same actions and knowledge in similar situations. So that's an advantage of having that happen. But they also prevent you from developing new ways of seeing, understanding, and solving problems. That is thinking out of the box. So keeping that in mind, I want to share a story here. And this is a very interesting story of a truck that was making its way under this bridge that you see there. The clearance is 12 feet. So like there's 12 feet of gap from the bottom of the bridge to the road. And while this truck was moving and making its way, it got stuck under the bridge and it wasn't able to move forward. Now, what happened is the driver of the truck got out, and um, he was trying to figure out how to get the truck out of the bridge, because he's in a bit of a tricky situation there. And there were a lot of bystanders who were also trying to solve the problem. Um, so there were some builders nearby, and they said, why don't we chip off like parts of the bridge so that like there's some gap that's made for the truck, and then the truck can move forward, right? So that was one of the solutions. Other people propose that they just push the truck from behind. Maybe with brute force they can kind of uh, push the truck forward. um, but then there was this boy, this really young boy, who um, proposed a solution that was very efficient and got the job done. Um, and it was more importantly, it was the simplest and quickest solution. So he proposed that why don't you let the air out of the tires, and that way the truck's height will decrease, and then you can move the truck forward. So that's what they did. And they let the air out of the tires of the truck, and then the truck was able to move forward without having to chip away at the bridge, which is a solution that takes a lot more time. And also the the other solution, which is like moving the truck with brute force, it's not super practical. And hence the solution of letting the air out of the tires is the simplest and the best solution. Um, so that is um, that is the out of the box solution that the young boy had proposed and made it work. Um, so that out of the box solution and or the out of the box thinking is what design thinking encourages. Um, it's like another example of design thinking that's still pretty out of the box is this example, this hypothetical example. um, Patient goes to doctor and he says, my back hurts when I get up in the morning. And then the doctor says, get up in the afternoon then. And then he presents a bill of $3,000 again. I'm kidding. So I would not take this example too seriously. But you get an idea of what out of the box thinking means. So let's talk a little bit about how design thinking can help us. So the first thing is that design thinking helps you observe and develop empathy with your target users and audience. It helps you better understand where they're coming from. And the second thing is that you're able to define the problem better by questioning your assumptions in design thinking. And again, I'm going over all of the theoretical aspects, and we'll get into the practical aspects of design thinking very soon. But from a theoretical aspect, you're able to define the problem better by questioning your assumptions. Um, Whatever preconceived notions you have about a problem, they're all challenged when you define the problem using design thinking. And the third thing is you get to reframe the problem in human-centric ways, and you get to ideate solution. So now that you've challenged your assumptions about the problem, you're going to reframe the problem, um, take a new look at it in a more human-centric way, and you're going to ideate solutions for that problem. And the fourth thing is you're also going to, it also helps, like design thinking also helps you adopt a hands-on approach in prototyping or building an initial solution. Um, so the reason I say initial solution is because that's just something that you come up in your first iteration of design thinking. And then that also brings me to the next part, which is you take that initial solution and you test it, and um, you can either test it with your users or internally, and based on the feedback that you get, based on other inputs that you get, you kind of reiterate and you try to get to better solutions. um, so these are the five aspects, these are the five ways that design thinking helps you come up with better solutions. Now, just to go over them again, observe, the first one is observe and develop empathy with our target users and audience. Second one, define the problem by questioning our assumptions. Third one, reframe the problem in human-centric ways and ideate solutions. Fourth, adopt a hands-on approach in prototyping or building an initial solution. Fifth, test out solutions and reiterate to get better ones. Now, if you look at a few keywords here, a few keywords that really stand out, it's empathy, define, ideate, prototyping, and test. And these five keywords are important because those are the five um, those are the five words that make up the five phases of design thinking. The first phase is design. The first phase is empathize. Second phase is define. Third phase is ideate. Fourth phase is prototype, and fifth phase is test. A short acronym for this is EDIPT. So we'll talk a little bit about all of these phases in detail. And just a heads up, design thinking is generally done in design thinking workshops. So design thinking workshops, when you have it with a group of people, they bring design thinking to life. Now, as a developer, like it's very important to have a good idea of what design thinking is, because it can really help you with work better with UX designers, product managers, and anyone who's a stakeholder in a business. So the idea here, the whole idea behind design thinking for developers is that if developers are able to implement design thinking at work, it helps them solve problems from an engineering perspective better. And in turn, that helps stakeholders better. So if it helps stakeholders, that leads to growth, that leads to your career growth. And that's the whole idea behind. So it's not just about writing better code that improves your career, but it's also about thinking about the whole problem, thinking about whole products holistically, and thinking about them as a whole and how they affect the business outcome. And all of these aspects are where design thinking comes into the picture. And as a developer, having that knowledge can really help you elevate yourself at the workplace and help you bring forward the best ideas. So moving on to the first stage, which is empathize. So with empathize, the idea here is that you see the user's world. So, and then you appreciate them for their inputs. You try to understand their feelings. And once you understand their feelings, you also communicate your understanding of their feelings. So the reason that all of these four aspects, they bring forward the true notion of empathy in UX design and also design thinking. So the reason you need to understand their feelings and also like communicate your understanding is so that you're more aligned on what they've understood, or sorry, you're more aligned on what you understood about them. Um, and if I was to like share a few ways to empathize with your users, the top three that come to mind are photo, video-based studies, and then you have interviews, then you have body storming. So let's talk a little bit about these three methods. Photo, video-based studies, it's when you when either like you let your users know that you're going to be recording them or taking photos of them, and they're like volunteering to do that so that you can work on your product to make it better. And then you have interviews, which is, it's pretty straightforward, but like I've seen UX designers or even developers and product engineers do interviews remotely in this situation. So interviews are also super effective. A one-on-one interview can be really effective in you trying to understand what your users are going through. And then you have something called as body storming. So body storming is when you experience it like your user would experience it. So as in, like, let's say let's go away from development for just a minute. Let's say I was designing, let's say I was building a skateboard. Now, the way is body storming for a skateboard would involve me actually like trying out the skateboard and seeing if it rolls properly or not and things like that. But that's what body storming is. It's a way of empathizing with the users where you actually try out the product that you're building as by mimicking one of your users. So that's what body storming is. And given our current situation, as like I said, remote interviews are much better than in-person interviews. That's what I would encourage, because as you can see, like even if a genie granted you 3 wishes, and you wish for in-person interviews, you're not gonna get your wish in this situation. So go ahead and stay away from in-person interviews and stick to remote interviews, whether it's at work or whether you're even for like freelancers. Remote interviews can still be a very effective tool in trying to empathize with your users. So moving on to the next stage, which is define. So in define, it's really just made of two aspects, which is analyze and synthesize. So you take a big chunk of the problem and you synthesize it, as in you break it down into smaller parts, and then you make sense of those smaller parts by analyzing them, by putting it back together into a picture. And then you kind of repeat this until you are able to define a problem more concretely. So that's what the define stage is. It's where you analyze and synthesize a problem. And then you have like, there are three, so there are more ways to define a problem, but these are the top three that come to mind. You have something called as space, saturate, and group. So what that means is you, along with a bunch of other like developers, product designers, product engineers, and UX designers or stakeholders, you come up with, you write what you know about the problem on Post-it notes. You write what you know about your users and what they do on Post-it notes, and then you kind of group them together. Like, how would you group them in a way that all of the grouped Post-it notes feel like they belong to the same group? And by grouping those Post-it notes in certain specific groups, you're able to understand where or which aspect of the product users are having the most trouble, or which part of the product needs more work. And that's what space, saturate, and group is. Then you have empathy maps. So empathy maps is when, again, here you use Post-it notes where you, along with a few other designers or engineers or stakeholders, you write down on Post-it notes what the user said, what the user did, what they thought, and what they felt. So um, being able to do this, it gives you an idea of being able to empathize with your users better. And these four aspects will help you define the problem better, because all of these four things are different actions: what they said, what they did, what they thought, and what they felt. All of these four aspects are very crucial to being able to define the problem better for your users. And then you have the third method, which is a how might we frame. So what that is you start by again, you can use Post-it notes for this, but you start by saying how might we, and what is the action that you need to take, for whom, like who are you doing it for, and to like to do what, or what is the goal. So it's made of 3 parts. What is the action that you want to take, for whom you want to take it, and what is the goal that you want to achieve. So just a quick fun example here is, if you're familiar with this game, I'm sure a lot of you are, with the Among Us game. Let's say you have a meeting, you might ask, how might we find the imposter, which is the action that you want to take, for everyone else, like everyone else apart from the imposter, to win this game, which is the goal. So the 3 parts here are, um, how like, finding the imposter is the action that you need to take, and then everyone else is the stakeholder, and then winning the game is the goal. um, and as you can see, Among Us games don't really work out as well as you want to. So sometimes the wrong imposter gets kicked out, and I'm not one to hold grudges, but I'm never playing that game again. Moving on to the third phase, which is ideate. So the ideate phase is when you you come up with as many ideas as you can, and there are multiple ways to go about this phase. But um, this is a fun phase where you come up with a lot of potential solutions. Um, and if I was to like talk a little bit about the different ways that you can do it, with the ideate phase, it's a little different. Out of these 3 methods, you choose the one that's most appropriate. What is the one that applies to your product the most, right? So you have this method called bingo selection, where um, you can either have a physical prototype of your solution, or you can have a digital prototype of your solution, or you can have an experience prototype of your solution. So physical prototype is a physical model of whatever you're trying to build, and then a digital prototype will exist on your phone, tablet, or a computer. And then you have experience prototype, which is something that you would need to experience, and it kind of falls in a gray area, but it also kind of falls slightly like outside of a physical and digital prototype. Now, the reason that you have something else, so the reason that you have 3 in bingo selection is because it's not restricted to, so not everything is a digital product, or rather, in other words, if you're a developer who's working with IoT products, in those instances, you will have to go outside of your comfort zone and have to work with physical prototypes and explore things like that. So that's also where this comes into the picture. It's also about keeping in mind how your physical prototype might work with your digital prototype. So that's the basic idea behind bingo selection. Um, and then you also have the 4 categories method. So in 4 categories method, you have, as the name says, 4 categories: most rational, most delightful, darling, and long shot. So most rational, as you can tell, like it's the idea that's most rational, like it's most, from a business perspective, it makes the most sense. And it also, like it's also feasible. And most delightful is something that would delight the users a lot. It would delight the end users a lot, but the feasibility or business viability is questionable. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's not possible at all, but it's questionable, as in it's unexplored. Now, then you have the darling category, which is something that, from a business perspective, or even from a design perspective or a development perspective, you would love to build it, because there are some things about it that you may like or your internal stakeholders may like. But again, how much the users may love it, with the darling category, you just have a feeling that the users may love it. Now, but that is not fully tested yet, or there's not enough data to surely say that users will definitely love it. Then you have the long shot. So the long shot category has ideas where you have, you're dreaming too high, and you have ideas there which may take a lot of time, or they might not be feasible because you haven't explored them. But it's a long shot, and it's going to take a lot of time to explore that, and it might not be a good idea to pursue those ideas right away. So you would group your ideas into these 4 categories and then make decisions based on what makes the most sense for your business. And then you have dot voting. So dot voting is when you have a lot of ideas thrown in by you and your team, and you're voting for the top 3 ideas. Um, and the way that you vote for the top 3 ideas is you would be given 3 dots, and you would place your dots on your top three, your most favorite 3 ideas, and that's what dot voting is. And then all of the rest of your team would also do the same. And then at the end of it, you would have a post-it note, or 2 or 3 post-it notes, which would have the highest number of dots. And that way, internally, you're able to decide that, okay, these 3 are the ideas that we want to pursue. So all of this is like how you would go into ideation. Something else that I wanted to share with ideation is that there's also another method called double diamond approach, where you diverge a lot by coming up with as many ideas as you can, and then you converge by narrowing those ideas down. And then after you narrow your ideas down, you take some feedback from people, and then you kind of, after taking the feedback, you diverge with your ideas and try to build the product right, try to find ways of building the product right, and then again you converge and go ahead with building the product right. So that's basically what the diamond process is, and I'll be sharing resources to learn more about that later. um, but there's really no best method um, in choosing what works for you. So if you feel like there is a certain ideation method that would work best for your team, go ahead and check in with your team and see if you can bring it about, and if you can have an ideation meeting, or like just an entire full-fledged design thinking workshop with your team, where you can uh, also like decide which ideation method to use. So there's no best method in ideation, which brings me to my next phase, which is prototype. So with prototype, what's interesting is that you get to build out an initial solution of your product. And what's interesting about that is there are many ways you could go about it, but in terms of fidelity, which means like the amount of detail that you put into your prototype, or the amount of detail that you put into your initial solution, um, there's 2 categories, like there's low fidelity and there's high fidelity. So in low fidelity, you would do things like storyboarding, sketching, paper prototyping. So storyboarding is just like how would the user's journey go through? Like you would go about and write stories around that. And I'm speaking more about from a development perspective. It looks different for different fields, but from a development perspective, you would go about and write what your initial user journey would look like and things like that. And with sketching, you would go ahead and sketch prototypes, or if you're so again from a development perspective, you would go ahead and sketch your web or mobile app. And same goes for paper prototyping. Paper prototyping, you can do it either online or on a piece of paper. um, and then you have high fidelity prototypes, where you would use tools like Figma, Adobe Illustrator, and you would even use 3D models if that's applicable to your digital product. Um, so I would really recommend Figma for developers, because that's been something that's going to be helpful to collaborate with designers, and also for your own understanding of how you can build prototypes. And so just a brief understanding of prototypes. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with this, the latest craze that's been spoken about on Twitter, Cyberpunk 2077. It has a lot of bugs, but this is an idea of what it looks like. Low fidelity prototypes, they don't look that great. They don't have a lot of detail. And then you have high fidelity prototype, which have a lot of detail, and they just look awesome. Um, And then moving on to the last phase, which is testing phase. So in the testing phase, as I said, you either test with your users or you may even test internally. But there are 5 guidelines to testing. Let your users compare alternatives to what you've built. And then the second is show your prototype, don't talk a lot about it. And then the third is ask users to talk through their experience and what they're going through and how they feel about the product and things like that. And then you have observe, ask, and then go ahead and ask follow-up questions for your users. Um, your users would also love it if you could ask them questions that are more specific to what they would like to see change or what bothers them and things like that. And all of these things really help um, improve the next iteration of the product better. So keeping that in mind, like it's also important to have the end goal in a rear view mirror or have the end goal right on top of your mind, because the end goal should be to see if your solution passes the tests of desirability, feasibility, and viability. Now, desirability is how much the users love it, how much the users want it. Then feasibility is how much, like, is it feasible from a technical perspective? Because if it's not, then there's no point in going ahead and building the product out. And then you have viability, which is from a business perspective, does it help the business? Does it help the business bottom line? So all of these three things are something that you should check your solution for if it passes the test or not. Now, keeping that in mind, like it's also important to to do usability testing. Um, so using the product without usability testing, you may not get the results that you want to. But using the product after usability testing, after a thorough usability testing, could result in the product working just like you want it to. Um, so so just to like reiterate about design thinking, um, it's an iterative, non-linear approach where you go from empathize to define to ideate, and then you go to prototype. And if you learn something from prototypes, you may go back to ideate to spark new ideas. But if not, you move on to testing. And testing can give insights to redefine the problem. So you may go back to defining the problem. And you could also like it could give you new ideas for the prototypes, and you could go back to the prototype stage. Or if you learn a lot about your users, and you will learn a lot about your users in the testing stage, you could also go back to empathizing with the users. So it's an iterative, non-linear approach. In the first iteration, although it is a little linear because you would have to go through these 5 stages, but after that, it is very much non-linear. Now, there has been a lot of debate over whether design thinking will help you solve problems better. So much so that it has gone on to other countries. And I want to say yes. Yes, design thinking will help you solve problems better from an engineering perspective, because it's a human-centric, empathy-driven approach to solving problems with out-of-the-box thinking. And what's interesting is that if you're looking to level up in your career by learning to solve problems better, there's a new newsletter that I'm starting with Caster.io called the Developer Digest. And this will have a holistic set of videos, podcasts, and articles that can help you solve problems better. So go ahead and check that out. I'll share the deck later, but give design thinking a shot today. And I believe it's important for developers to know what this is and all of the different phases in design thinking. And I would like to conclude this presentation. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here. If you're from other time zones, I cannot begin to appreciate how much this means to me that you're here, because I'm pretty sure it's super early for you if you're from Germany or from America. So thank you. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Cool. So I see that there are no questions on Slido. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my deck, and you can reach out to me on Twitter or Instagram or my website. And if you have any questions, we can chat there. If you want to hit me up, just feel free to contact me there. But this has been great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for making it to my talk.